We are so pleased to have this panel of distinguished advocates here with us today. When the conference committee began planning this portion of the program, we realized that some of the most innovative and impactful advocacy on immigration detention is happening right here in New Orleans. The first New Orleanian and panelist I have the honor to introduce today is Mr. Bill Quigley. Bill Quigley is a law professor and the director of the law clinic in the Gillis Law and Poverty Law Center at Loyola University of New Orleans. He has been an active public interest lawyer since 1977, serving as legal counsel and a prophetic voice on a wide range of issues including human rights, public housing, voting rights, the death penalty, living wage, civil liberties, educational reform, Katrina social justice issues, and constitutional rights and civil disobedience. He recently served as the legal director of the Center for Constitutional Rights for 2 years and has litigated numerous cases with the NAACP Legal Defense Educational Fund, the Advancement Project, and the ACLU of Louisiana, for which he has served as counsel for 15 years. Professor Quigley has published widely on issues critical to realizing a just community and nation. He has also been an active volunteer with the School of the Americas, active volunteer lawyer with the School of the Americas Watch, and the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti. The work of a social justice champion never ends. Today, Bill and his wife Debbie are leaving for a protest in favor of ordaining priests this very afternoon in Rome, so Bill will need to leave immediately after presenting. We're so pleased to have you here with us.
Great, thank you. I really do apologize. I've been teaching and going back and forth. This has been a really terrific conference, and the things that I've missed, I look forward to seeing them online. It's really very good. I hope I can contribute. I'm going to speak briefly about detention issues regarding Haiti. And first I have to figure out how to do this. Okay, yeah. I think a couple of context things. I know that we've talked about these in other places in the conference, but the detention and deportation of Haitians has a context that we have to address. This is the context in which we are, the reality in which we are in this country right now. The constant scream for deportation and immigration issues and that is happening at the time when this country is expelling and deporting and incarcerating more people than ever in our history. And part of what our challenge of advocacy is to do what you have done so well in this conference is to tell the truth. To tell the truth to people across the country. So to put this context around one particular thing, we have to know the truth in terms of how many people we're talking about, and it's at the highest level ever in the history of our country. We're also at the highest level of incarcerating people in general in the history of our country, and we are the #1 country incarcerating people in the world. And so you put all these things together, we have this incredible decisions that millions of people are not people. They're not entitled to human rights. They are not entitled to the same dignity that we would demand and insist for ourselves. The Haitian issue gives us some idea about that. Contrast, again, in the beginning. Think of what it meant when we had U.S. Baptists after the earthquake that were in Haitian jails under this charge of, spiriting out kids for an orphanage. Remember how that drama just gripped the country and the papers and that for time, day after day after day, talking about the way they lived and this sort of stuff. And contrast that with the deportation of people in the United States back into Haitian jails. Do we hear anything about what the jails are like or what people are like or what their families back home, their 4-year-old daughter thinks or their wife thinks or their cousins think or any of the institutions that they belong in? So we have to understand that. That's the context in which we fight for the rights that we're talking about. So we have that. We also have to talk not just about racial issues and citizenship issues, but the political issues of how we determine what country people are from and the self-interest that our country is using to manipulate those various processes. So putting Haiti into those contexts, the growth in incarceration, growth in deportation, the racial issues, the class issues, the geopolitical issues, very important. At the very end, I'm going to give you my email address, so you can. I'll be happy to send you anybody a copy of this stuff, so you don't have to worry about trying to keep track of that. So Haiti, already the poorest place in the hemisphere before the earthquake, right? I have many friends in Haiti. I have a godchild in Haiti. I was the best man at a wedding in Haiti. I've been in and out of Haiti probably 25 or more times since the year 2000. The first call that I got when Katrina swamped New Orleans, and my wife and I are trapped in a hospital, the phones wouldn't work. The very first phone call that I got on my phone when I started working was from my friend in Haiti checking on me. And so when earthquake is dropped onto a country that's already facing such severe things, it's just incredible. So this is the earthquake happened on the 12th. On the 13th, the United States, by executive order, decided we're not going to deport anybody else to Haiti. The country's too messed up. It doesn't make sense. The numbers, you know, we're already hitting the highest numbers ever. More Haitians don't do that. So we stopped it on the 13th. I was in Haiti last week. I was in Port-au-Prince for the week. I've been there several times since the earthquake. There are still today over 600,000 people that are living in tent/shelter who have lived in those in various places since the day the earthquake happened. And these are tent/shelters with no electricity, no water, no sewage, no security, no nothing. So that's the way that country is right now. They are really under tremendous, tremendous stress. Part of the outcome of that is the UN special forces that are down there, the so-called peacekeeping forces that are really more the order forces. When we talk about law and order, they are the order forces. They, unfortunately, through their people in other places that have cholera, they introduced cholera to Haiti. And since that time, you know, at minimum of 6,000 people have been killed. Others are saying it's well over 10,000 haven't documented, and hundreds of thousands of people who are sick. And that's today. Despite all this, this year, the United States resumed deporting people to Haiti. The exact day that President Obama administration, this is executive order, this is not Congress, this is not that, this is a stroke of the pen. The day that the United States started deporting people back to Haiti, that same day they warned all United States citizens not to travel to Haiti for fear of the cholera and the unrest that was going there. So in terms of defining who the Haitian sisters and brothers are, they are not our sisters and brothers. They're not even people the way we look at them, because they are not exposed to this sort of stuff. So we started at the exact same day. And a Haitian prison is a very tough place to be. So the idea is that we would take people out of our prisons and send them back to the Haitian prisons. Does Haiti want that? Do you think with Haiti with 600,000 people in tents today and all this, do they want people to be deported from our prisons back to them? There's inadequate jobs for the people who are there. This is not Haiti asking for people to come back. This is the United States saying, look, as a condition of us continuing to send money down there, you are going to have to do your part for that. So they had to do that. So people protested some, and that had happened around the country. But again, contrast what that was with the Baptist missionaries that were in prison there and the outcome that we looked at. So remember the date here. So it started, this 34-year-old man deported to Haiti on January 20th of this year. He came out of a detention facility in Louisiana where he joined a hunger strike with a bunch of other Haitians who were in detention. They deported all the people who were involved in the hunger strike, and he lived 9 days in Haiti because he was put into the intersection of jails and cholera and all these other things. Jails, as you know, are the worst places for TB and infectious diseases, and that even in this country. So within 9 days, he died. Many others are sick. Then the response of Haiti at the United States urging was, don't put them in jail, just release them. So people who come, get sick with cholera or this sort of stuff, the response of the United States is, get them out of here. We don't want them to die while they're officially in detention. The Inter-American Commission for Human Rights issued precautionary measures ordering the United States. They don't have the legal authority to order, but they strongly urged the United States to stop the deportations because Haiti wasn't ready for them. There's not medical conditions set up. It makes no sense under anything other than an election year trying to be tough on that sort of stuff. So they did that. They don't do this very frequently. They don't tell the United States what they ought to do because, the United States usually doesn't do it anyway, but they're reluctant to do it. Catholic bishops came out and said the deportation should be halted immediately. The United States continued to send people to Haiti, so they came up with another order in May saying you cannot keep deporting people from prisons in the United States to Haiti until you meet a couple of basic things, which is no chance that Haiti will ever be able to meet. The protests continue, and this is, I'd like to, in the light of these contexts, give a couple specific actions that if people are interested in doing something specifically about the Haiti deportation. First thing on all this, I think, is a theme that's gone through a couple of the presentations today, including the very first one today. Our challenge is not reform. Our challenge is a radical revolution of values. It's a radical change. In the meantime, there are things that we can do. But this is the first thing, is to say, if that was my sister or brother or uncle or niece or those, I would not allow that to happen, and just because they're not my sister and brother, that we cannot allow it to happen, and we certainly can't allow it to happen in silence. So I've represented hundreds of people who ended up in jail. One of the guys said, they gave the first 10 people, they said, we're going to send you to minimum security federal prison for going on to the base at Fort Benning, Georgia. And this 11th guy said, don't send me to a minimum security prison. And the judge said, well, why not? He said, because I refuse to put up walls in my own mind. He said, if you're going to send me to a prison, it better have walls, because otherwise I'm leaving. So, and I don't want to give you any other indication. So part of what we have to do is recognize it's not just these 2 million people who are in prison. It's not just these couple 100,000 people who are being deported. There's things going on inside of us where we are putting these walls up and saying, well, a couple 100,000 people, they must not really be people. These millions of people, they must not really be people like us. Otherwise, how could we live with that? So our first thing is to tear down those walls in our mind. Second thing I would suggest, there is a terrific advocacy organization called the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti. They partner with a group in Port-au-Prince, a human rights office, IJDH.org. They come out with a weekly, they call half hour for Haiti, but it's not nearly a half hour. But they focus on trying to help the people of Haiti by changing the United States policies and practices. Because we can do a lot of good. It's not just going down there to build a clinic and do water and that, all of which is important. But the biggest source of what's good and what's bad in Haiti happens in Washington, D.C. and in New York City and Wall Street and that. So I would suggest to do that very specifically. One of the ideas they're talking about is that there is a Cuban family reunification parole program that was established in 2009. Again, one of these things that ICE does it so that people who are already approved to be able to come to the United States, but we have these quotas that keep people out. So, well, look, we're going to let you go ahead and wait in the United States, wait for that time. There are some pressing political and economic issues that say we can go ahead and let you wait in this country for that process to happen. Why couldn't we do that for Haitians? There's 104,000 people in Haiti who've already been approved to come to the United States. Family members, these are people whose families are already here and that sort of stuff. So we could do that. Now, the Center for Global Development has a paper on it if anybody's interested in doing some more research on that. Migration as a tool for disaster recovery. That sort of intersects this idea of immigration, disaster recovery, and the like. Because the truth is, just as it happened on the Gulf Coast after Katrina, the people who really do the help and bring about the change are the people themselves. So for Haiti, it's the Haitians who are rebuilding that. This reunification plan is not a total pie-in-the-sky thing. It's been endorsed by a number of places. I see I have a warning, 2-minute warning, so I'll back up and try and get a long field goal from here. In addition to these specific bills, there are organizations, JSRI is a member of this organization. Very, very important advocacy stuff for us to do that not only affects Haitians, but affects the whole group. Again, basing it on human rights, basing it on justice issues. And the last Haitian advocacy group I would really encourage you to look at is Alternative Chance, which is really a self-help, peer counseling and advocacy. And this tries to put the tools in the hands of the people who are in prison in the United States. I last week met with a couple of detainees who had been in Louisiana before they were flown out. They said, once you come to Louisiana, that's the worst thing you can be told, because that's the last step. When they transfer you from New York or Midwest or the West Coast to Louisiana, you are in deep trouble, because the next place you go is onto a plane to be dropped off there. But there are self-help things that prisoners can file their own lawsuits for themselves to talk about this inter-American court ruling and do some work on that. These are all pretty small organizations, pretty grassroots groups, but very helpful. And that's my email address that I'd be glad to send a copy of this to anybody. But thank you very much for your for this conference and for your attention. And I do apologize, I am on my way to the airport.
I'm very pleased to introduce our next panelist, who has been working in the trenches of detention, lawyering, and bringing justice, compassion, and hope to immigrants detained in Louisiana for nearly 10 years. First with the Catholic Legal Immigration Network, and since 2009 as an assistant clinic professor at the Loyola Law School Clinic. Professor Hiroko Kusuda trains clinic student attorneys to gain essential litigation skills, and she also brings students monthly to the 10 South Parish Detention Center, 4 hours from New Orleans, to provide Know Your Rights presentations. Professor Kusuda has served on the executive board of the AILA Mid-South chapter since 2000, and she is the AILA ICE liaison on immigration enforcement issues. Hiroko, thank you for all that you do on the front lines of immigrant advocacy, and we're so pleased to have you here with us today.
It was a tough act to follow. He's my boss. You know how hard it is to follow his footsteps, and he's all over the world. Thank you so much for being here, and I think I'm so impressed by eloquent presentation of my previous speakers. It's just absolutely amazing. And I was just talking to my one of my co-workers in this difficult journey of immigration attorneys, and saying how boring are our stories going to be compared to those people who have been in this life for many years before we have even entered this world. And compassion and the deep commitment of those people being among you makes me so happy to be here today. And but let me start out by saying how I began my journey in the life of detained immigrants. I myself came from Japan, just one of the very many countries that's not really suffering very much, economically speaking. However, we had a recent disaster, and the country itself is teetering on the brink of economic disaster, nuclear disaster. But we receive outpouring compassion and help from people from all over the world, and I feel happy that I could be one of the people who can volunteer and help clean up some debris over there this summer. And I felt that people's spirits have not been broken, and people are resilient. And I do believe that in our life that we live in this country, treating people from different backgrounds is very, very important. I received compassionate, kind treatment when I was in a very difficult situation, and I hope United States of America will do the same for the people who are in need of help. I do believe that immigration attorneys' work is important, but we can't do our job alone. We need people who, such as Sister Joanne said, kindly, respectfully request services from the deportation officers and never take no for answer. Persistence works. But I was alone in 2002 when I started this work as a detention attorney. I don't know, I had never heard that word before. I never had a job description before me. But when I was hired to do this job in 2002 by Catholic Legal Immigration Network, my former boss is sitting in this room, and he hired me and told me that Louisiana has amazing number of detainees. You can deal with people from all over the world. But to be honest with you, you're going to be only one non-profit immigration attorney in the entire state. At that time, there are about 4,000 immigrants who are detained among a couple of detention centers. Now we have 4 long-term detention centers among us, closest of which is sitting among the beautiful Cajun country of Basile, Louisiana, close to Crowley and Lafayette. One of my coworkers go there every month to do Know Your Rights program with his students at LSU. My jail is situated in a city called Waterproof, Louisiana. Believe it or not, that's an actual city. In the Tenso Parish Detention Center. And that's where I bring my students and volunteer attorneys and interpreters to visit the detainees every month. So we can talk to them and give them general immigration programs as well as individual interviews and advocate for them if they have medical needs, library access issues, or telephone issues. So far, we have been able to sustain a professional relationship with ICE officials, and they have been responsive in terms of the liaison and advocacy efforts. My another hat is to do a public education and pro bono attorney solicitation. The reason for this job is that since Louisiana detention centers are very, very far away from us, probably 80% of the immigration lawyers in the state are based in greater New Orleans area. And there's one jail in Oakdale, Louisiana. There are 3 immigration courts. Those 3 judges only hear cases of people who are detained. Those detainees are brought to the courts, shackled and handcuffed in prison guard. And they are classified in 3 different security levels, 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2 can commingle, but not level 3. They are supposed to be dangerous, so they're separate whenever we do visit them. And Oakdale is about 3.5 hours from us. Basile is about 3.5 from here. Tenso Parish Detention Center is about 4. Another jail in Gina, Louisiana is called LaSalle Parish Correctional Center. It's 5 hours away from us. I think it's also important to let you know, immigrants are not entitled to appointed counsel because it's a civil proceedings. It's not criminal in nature. They are entitled to a privilege of being represented by a private attorney at no cost to the government. Therefore, almost 90% of detained immigrants don't have attorneys in adversarial immigration proceedings. And Oakdale immigration courts were given interesting distinction last year, that most efficient immigration courts in the country last year. But they issued the highest number of deportation orders in the country in the shortest period of time. And there's only one full-time private attorney who practiced immigration law in Oakdale. Detainees' problem also are multiplied by numerous transfers that they suffer. Once they are picked up in New York, they may change detention centers 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. By the time they arrive in the state, they don't have any legal papers, they don't have any property, they lost contact with their previous attorneys, they don't know where their families are. When we see them, they have absolutely no idea where they are. So the beginning of a presentation is to teach them the address of the detention center. You are in Waterproof, Louisiana. Do you know where it is? They have no idea where the Waterproof is. I never knew Waterproof existed until 2005. That is one of the many, many complications the immigration detention system produces. I think to give you a number, I was digging into this the statistics that the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security issued. Apparently, in the year 2007 fiscal year, 84% of the detainees are transferred from one place to another. My former client, who had been detained in Louisiana, were transferred 12 times among 5 different states. We could not find him because at that time there was no detainee locator system instituted by ICE. So we had to call different jails, and the jail told us, well, you're going to have to talk to ICE. And I call ICE, and ICE tells me, oh, he's in transit. That's the only answer I could get. And a large number of transfers reflects ICE's vast detention apparatus. And ICE has approximately about 40,000 beds at its disposal throughout the country. And on any given day, in the last fiscal year, more than 37,000 people of those were filled. And all in all, ICE deported close to 400,000 people at the cost of measly $2.6 billion. So many of these facilities, as you know, are located in rural, geographically isolated locations. In the case of Louisiana, cities such as Gina, Basile, Waterproof, and Oakdale are economically depressed. And my personal experience tells me, I'm pretty sure my coworkers agrees with me, I have never met a single jail guard that speaks Spanish. So by the nature, these local locations are far from the places where the majority of immigrants lived prior to being detained and where their families continue to make their homes. Many immigrants are moved many thousands of miles away from any social support networks that they had in their residential communities. The limited number of people residing in these isolated locations also means that there's a limited pool of potential prison employees. Some prisons, as a result, have difficulty hiring and retaining qualified staff. So, as I said before, few immigrants actually get an attorney, and even those who have an attorney have a hard time providing them with useful information and documents while they are being bounced from prison to prison around the country. So we represent detained immigrants. For those places that are immigrants or detainees, a couple of facilities don't even allow telephone conferences with attorneys. So how am I going to get information from my clients? some jails allow us to have telephone conference with our clients, but you have to make written requests 24 hours in advance. So for emergency situations, you are not able to communicate with your client, even though your client's final appeal was exhausted and denied. They don't have time to let you know, my deportation officer came and picked me up and told me to pack up. Most of the cases we find out after the fact, and my clients are back wherever they come from. Government-funded legal orientation program and privately funded Know Your Rights programs do exist. We do believe in it. However, this is not a comprehensive solution. It's not a substitute for having your own attorney representing you in an adversarial immigration system. So, immigrants are entitled to due process under the law. What does that mean? The due process clause is regarded as a guarantee of the fundamental fairness of governmental proceedings. So for the due process clause to actually protect fundamental fairness, the clause has been interpreted as its base to require the opportunity to be heard by an adjudicative authority. According to the Supreme Court, the fundamental requirement of due process is the opportunity to be heard at a meaningful time in a meaningful manner. In the name of public safety, immigrants are detained and deported every day based on criminal convictions for which they have paid and served sentences many, many years ago. This is a serious indictment of the American criminal justice system also, which is supposed to punish and rehabilitate a convicted person in their penal institutions. Dr. Shiro yesterday told us the goal of ICE was to help to make immigration detention system civil. My experience as a detention attorney in almost 10 years' time tells me that it is not an achievable goal. You cannot take away somebody's physical freedom and call it civil. In hindsight, when I was an INS liaison for American Immigration Lawyers Association, director of INS at the time told me, yes, we need to consider civil detention a reality. I am thinking about putting the barges on the Mississippi River to convert it into a detention facility. Don't you think it's a great idea? Sue agrees. At that time, I thought it was absolutely amazingly in disbelief. In hindsight, I think may not have been a bad idea after all. But thank you so much for attention, and I hope we can talk a little more later.
I was at that meeting, and that was pretty amazing. We're very pleased to introduce Jacinta Gonzales, who is the lead organizer for the New Orleans Worker Center for Racial Justice and the Congress of Day Laborers. Since Hurricane Katrina, Jacinta and the Congress of Day Laborers have helped to establish and maintain a base of laborers dedicated to building worker power, advancing racial justice, and mobilizing workers against race and industry. She was the lead investigator and the primary author of 2 reports that documented the inhumane conditions in the Immigration Detention Center in Basile, Louisiana, and she played a role in exposing abuses in the South Louisiana Detention Center. Jacinta is currently a Soros Justice Fellow, and she's also one for whom organizing comes quite naturally. Both of her parents are community organizers in Mexico. The authors of the Organizing for Social Change, considered by many the Bible for social justice organizers, write that a good organizer is motivated by strong feelings of love and caring. This is quite obvious if you have ever had the opportunity to see Jacinta at work. She's one of the most gifted and effective organizers working in the South today. Thank you, Jacinta, for being here with us today.
Thank you for that introduction, Sue. I was like, I recognize the first part, but not the second part. Thank you guys so much for having me today. I really do appreciate it. And I do appreciate a law school having a conference on detention and inviting an organizer. So for all the non-lawyers in the room, we're here. At the Congress of Day Laborers, we've been organizing day laborers and their families since Hurricane Katrina. And we really, as an organizer, you're used to getting crazy calls. I've gotten calls of people saying, I want to sue McDonald's because they didn't give me my lunch on time and I think it was racist. And I've had people call me and say, my family member passed away, can you contact the morgue for me? We have a big range of calls and we get a lot of variety. One day I got a call a couple of years back when we started organizing in Basile from someone whose brother was in the South Louisiana Detention Center in Basile. And he said, well, the people inside of the detention center are going on hunger strike. And they called the press. And the press didn't know what to do, so they said, call the Congress of Day Laborers. And so we said, well, let's see what this call is about. And we went out there the next day and interviewed this man's brother. And he was set to be deported the next day. But he said, we have to do something about the conditions inside of this jail. We're not animals, we're human beings. I said, well, tell me, what are the problems? What's going on? And he talked about things that are pretty basic in most Louisiana detention centers and jails. Well, they ration out our toilet paper. The food is disgusting and we can't eat it. We don't get medical attention. And they make us wear women underwear. And they make you wear women's underwear? And he was like, yes. And this was the first experience I had where people were trying to explain to me what was so dehumanizing about being in a space where they don't give you toilet paper and they don't give you underwear, knowing that there's such abundance in this country. Where it was very intentional to see, why would you give 400 detained men nylon underwear that most women would cringe to look at? And there was something so passionate, so true about the desire to want to change that, to want to demand humanity, and to want to be able to be agents in their own change. And I was surprised because I thought that people were going to precisely say, I want help being represented in immigration court. I want to stop my deportation. I want to file a lawsuit. But people truly did want to organize, wanted to stand up, wanted to have some form of resistance, but be heard through that resistance. And so the gentleman was going to be deported the next day. I said, well, call me back and give me some more names of other people and I'll come back. I probably, Basile, when you're going to the detention center, you have to cross through the rice fields to be able to get to it. So you know that you have to go back to where there's cell phone reception. But I quite crossed the line of cell phone reception and immediately got a call. And I got 25 names and A numbers of people who wanted to meet with us the next day to talk about organizing a hunger strike. And so, what to do? We had to start organizing a hunger strike. The workers started organizing within the detention center. They had their ways of communicating cell from cell, so Bearcat 3 knew when Bearcat 2 would be inside of the lunchroom and when they would be able to pass the note to the people from Tiger. And it was so beautiful to see people come up with these forms of communication and resistance and how to explain this. It was probably about 2 weeks after the first hunger strike happened, and I was walking out and I saw behind me run in 10 guards dressed as if they were going to, riot, dressed in riot gear. Their black bags, their black masks, running into the jail. And I was like, uh-oh. People were told that if they were on hunger strike, they would be placed in solitary detention. And people locked arms in their cell and said, no, we're staying here. This is the amount of resistance that people are going through to get toilet paper, to demonstrate that there truly are human beings within the detention center. But it was very interesting to sort of talk to people and help to organize the community outside of people in detention around these same issues. And really develop this analysis that detention in the United States is part of the life cycle of an immigrant. So many of our members who were outside helping to organize had family members who were inside, or had been inside and been deported and come back because they have their children here, they have their homes here, they have their community here. And this is the first time when people started to really formulate this idea that we have the right to remain. And if we have the right to remain in this country as a community, then we also have the right to remain as human beings. And that means being human beings within detention. And so the beauty of the hunger strike really was to offer up a vision of changing the detention system with the people inside as the primary actors. Not as people that needed help, that needed assistance, or even needed representation, but just needed a way to open up the lid of what was happening. And all of these brave voices, Fausto from New York, who had been transferred 10 times, and he would literally bring us the mosquitoes and the roaches so we could see the size of them. We had workers who would bring out the underwear so we could show it to the press. There was people who were really fighting to bring up this evidence and show it in their own words, from their own hands, what was happening. And the success of that was that after the hunger strike, there was over 130 articles published nationwide of the hunger strike in Basile. There was a New York Times editorial, and Dr. Dora Shiro, in her first weeks of working for the administration, had to come down to directly have conversations with the hunger strikers. So that the amount of power that people in detention can develop is there. The question is how we see it and how we support it to make sure that their voices are an integral part about this debate on detention. The fun thing was, one of the hunger strikers was able to bond out and was able to travel to Washington, D.C. with another host of members of the Congress of Day Laborers and meet for a second time with Dr. Shiro in her offices in D.C. Now, I don't think you guys understand the success to have a delegation of undocumented workers walk into the National ICE's office and have a conversation about detention standards. Our membership IDs skyrocketed. Everyone in New Orleans wanted one, because apparently you could get into the ICE offices in D.C. with one. But it really was a moment of having to negotiate and having to have face-to-face conversations with people in detention when they actually have power. And it really makes us see that we have to think of this model of change in the immigration system in a different way that includes the voices of those that are inside, because only they can defend their humanity. No one else can do that for them. And I think that's what's part of the interesting debate, especially in Louisiana, because so much of the conversation around immigration right now is about who is a criminal and who isn't, and who deserves detention and who doesn't. We're at a point where alternatives to detention, right, if they're not barges in the Mississippi, they mean ankle shackles. Everyone says, oh, well, electronic monitoring, that's such a better alternative to being in detention. Well, I guess if those are your only two options, but are those really our only two options? If immigration is a civil system, what prevents a mother from being with her child? And so we've had many cases in New Orleans of members who have confronted or contacted the immigration system or the criminal justice system, and in that have been retaliated against. So we have members of the Congress of Day Laborers who have been fighting against the National Guard since Katrina to make sure that workers on Elysian Fields have the right to look for work. And you have immigration posing as a contractor to come up and pick up those workers and say, I need 3 painters, and turn the corner, and it's an ICE raid. You have members defending the right to work on the corner on Claiborne and Martin Luther King. And quite literally, ICE agents coming from behind, grabbing your shirt, and saying, show me your papers. Based on what? Racial profiling? That's the only evidence that they can have, that any Latino standing on a corner must be undocumented. You have women like Delmi Palencia, who was arrested during a domestic dispute with her husband. The police arrested her, kept her for 45 days, dropped the charges, and then the sheriff decided to voluntarily submit to a hold request from ICE. The law only allows him to hold someone for 48 hours. He held her for a week. She took the sheriff to court. The hold request was dropped. She was reunited with her family. 2 weeks later, ICE comes and knocks on her door and says, are you Delmi Palencia? I'm coming for you. And she's taken to Gina, Louisiana. Her son post was 8 months. And so these are the civil rights leaders of our time. And these are the people who are interfacing with this detention system. And these are the people who are being called illegals, whose humanity is being stripped from them, and only they can fight for it. But now the administration is announcing that it's going to be using prosecutorial discretion to close cases precisely like the ones I just mentioned. And when the regional director, Scott Sutherfield here in Louisiana, is asked to exercise that prosecutorial discretion, he has denied it. And so we really do have a human rights crisis, a civil rights crisis, and have to have accountability. But accountability in a way that really lets those people that can only fight for their humanity themselves be at the forefront. And so we really do have to start to engage the community in supporting those voices and supporting those struggles. Because if we continue to allow this conversation about criminality to dominate the discourse, then people's humanity will never come through. I remember just last week when I was walking into the other law school where I was close by, it said the criminalization of everything. It's not just immigrants, it's not just drugs, it really is everything. So if we continue to fight on the basis of who is a criminal and who is not, we will lose. We have to fight on the basis of who is a human being. And only human beings can define that for themselves. So thank you very much for having me.
Well, we've got some time for questions and answers. Yes, Mary.
Hiroko, do you know, does ICE ever give you any reason why detainees are transferred so often?
Apparently, the detainee transfer is monitored and controlled in headquarter level. So local officials have talked to us about the multiple transfers are beyond their control.
Hi, Mark Nofri from Brooklyn Law School. This is a question also for Hiroko. Could you talk a little more about the difficulties that detained immigrants face in litigating their cases, either pro se or like you said, with lawyers? Like what kinds of documents they need to bring to hearings, what their access is to legal materials in detention centers, etc.
One of the examples is that Oakdale Immigration Court has this televideo hearings. The lawyer can be any of the 3 places. Detainees detained in Gina, Louisiana, judges in Oakdale, lawyers in New Orleans. And new immigration courts are now accepting fax filing. So if you need to preserve some documents and get it admitted as evidence, you can't do it contemporaneously. And also government routinely violate filing deadlines and file documents devastating to your client's case on the day of the hearing. And judge routinely admits that documents as an evidence. That's one of the pretty bad examples.
Jacinta, I have a question. I lost you somewhere, and I just wanted you to clarify a little bit. You mentioned here locally, it sounded like someone was denied permission to use discretion, the thing that Obama, will you talk a little bit about that, because I lost you.
Sure, sorry. I was at a conference yesterday where they said that every time you had to break it down and you had to do a little dance. So I appreciate you just asking the question and not asking me to do the dance. I would say a couple of months ago, President Obama, the administration announced that they were going to publish a new memo. They published a new memo saying that they were going to use prosecutorial discretion more. This is prosecutorial discretion they've already always had, that any prosecutor in any court has to close cases. The announcement was that the over 300,000 cases that are pending in immigration court were going to get reviewed, and those that were not a threat to public safety or fit several characteristics that are pretty vague and still undefined would get their cases closed. So we have several cases that are open, that are in court, that we believe should be closed because they are civil rights and labor leaders in the immigrant rights movement here in New Orleans. And several of those instances, for example, the instance of Delmi, whose story I told, or in the case of, over 20 workers who were picked up in a raid in Kenner a couple of weeks ago, the regional director has refused to use his prosecutorial discretion in closing their cases and to continue with their deportation, or with their deportation proceedings. So that's the situation we're in now, where the administration can make an announcement, but it's still discretionary. So the regional director can use his discretion as he sees fit. And so he does not see fit to use it to protect people who are fighting against the criminal justice system or are fighting for their labor and civil rights. And that's the moment of crisis that we have to recognize and respond to.
I'm sorry, we have time for one more question on Andrea.
Since I just want to thank you so much, and I really appreciate the perspective that you bring in terms of talking about the power of people in detention and how we must support that and bring them to the forefront. So my question to you is, can you just in the last couple of minutes, can you give us some concrete ideas of what we as a community can do?
Sure. I do think it is about starting to redefine the problem in some ways. So I think even this conversation about, is it about incarceration or is it about conditions? So if we were to incarcerate a lot more people with better conditions, would that necessarily mean that we would have achieved our goal? And so I do think it's about redefining the problem. So even about, I have reached out to Hiroko and Ken probably once a week since they know me, and they're probably used to me being like, can you take this case, can you take this one? So I do think that people should have representation, but at the same time we're seeing a situation where out of 4,000 people, some cases will be able to be fought in court, but most people won't even have a way to be able to fight their case. And so, because of the way the immigration system is structured now. And so, it is, I think, a question. There are obviously concrete things that we can do as organizations, as organizers, but I do think it's a question of re-envisioning the problem at hand. Is it about conditions, or is it about incarceration issues? Is it about legal representation, or is it about how we define legality in this country? And so I think it's some of those paradigm shifts that we can start to contribute to the conversation that can really be able to bring better results.
Well, thanks. Thank you all for being amazing.